Welcome to part 2 of the history of Fortitude Valley. We begin with the economic explosion of the 1880s, and later on we'll look at actual explosions that ripped through here in the latter half of the 20th century. The one and only Wickham Hotel. It opened in 1885, but when it did open, it was known as the Oriental Hotel. And they got some pretty amazing cellars just under the floor there. Well, where else would you have cellars? Telling me about, okay.
Now,
Person they'd come down here.
do you think people would be interested?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
So I just want to say thank you very much, Betty, for letting me come down here and take a look, and for being such a gracious host on the day. Next one, the Fortitude Valley Post Office. This was actually the Post Office and Telegraph Office. It opened in 1887. On the top floor, that's where the postmaster lived with his family. When it was announced that this building was going to be put up, the locals were against it. They didn't want it put here. They preferred it to have been built down on the intersection of Wickham Street and Brunswick Street, closer to the main centre of the valley. But no, it was put here. And during the Great Depression, this became a site where people could come and get their welfare benefits. That's the Empire Hotel. It opened in 1888. It replaced an earlier hotel on the site that was known as the Empire Family Hotel, and that opened in 1865. They've got Star Wars and Lord of the Rings on continual playing here. Lord of the Rings and Star Wars over there. The Jubilee Hotel is just across the road, and generally when I get to the site of a new bit of the video, I shoot that place with two cameras. First of all, the A camera, the DJI Osmo Action 4, which is currently filming me right now, and I also use my phone. And just as a bit of camera trivia, I just wanted to show you the difference between the two. When you switch on this camera, again the one you're looking at right now, this is the frame you get. But when I use my phone from the same angle, the standard frame you get is this. Anyway, just thought you might like to know the difference between the two cameras. There it is, the Jubilee Hotel behind me. Opened in 1887, and it was called the Jubilee Hotel to commemorate 50 years of Queen Victoria on the throne. When it was built, you had excellent views from there out over towards Tenerife, Bulimba and Breakfast Creek. Now, of course, the whole built environment is well built up and you can't see Jack. Oh, there's Jack. Hi. Come around to the side of the Jubilee Hotel, and if you're going to go exploring, urban exploring, and you're looking for historical things, make sure you come around to the side and to the back, if you can get there legally, of old buildings, especially old hotels. The back of the Jubilee Hotel, right up the top there, you can just make out where there was once advertising there. Now, too much of the old paintwork has been obliterated, so I don't know what it was trying to sell. Prince Consort Hotel, opened in 1888. This is what it looks like upstairs. Hi for everyone. Hello.
Ready for my...
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, thank you so much for the lights. It was in 1890 that the Brunswick Street train station was opened. I've just got to dodge all these scooters. And it was built at ground level, but in the early 1970s, the train line here was dug deeper, which meant that the train station had to be lowered and more or less ended up being underground.
In 1891, Irishman Thomas Charles Burney opened his first store in Brunswick Street. It was a success, and he expanded the business there several times. He eventually bought more land at Duncan Street and Ann Street. In 1894, a fellow by the name of James McWhirter joined Burney as the general manager of the store. In 1902, the T.C. Burney and Company building was constructed, and it had frontages on Duncan Street and Brunswick Street. By the way, T.C. Burney was Australia's first self-made millionaire, and at one time he lived at Glengariff at Hendra.
However, McWhirter left the company in 1898 and purchased Piggott's Drapery at 292 Brunswick Street. He then set about establishing it as a department store. And soon after that, he began buying up land nearby. And it was in 1912 that the 5-storey McWhirter's building was built. His wife was sometimes pressed into service as a walking billboard.
The design of the building was not entirely unique. The Rhodes and Company store on Wickham Street had a very similar look. In 1930, extensions were made to McWhirter's, giving it its more or less current appearance.
It was the combination of these two massive department stores, T.C. Burney and McWhirter's, that helped make Fortitude Valley the most popular shopping destination in Brisbane, and that carried on into the late 1960s. Down here, just outside Cathedral Place, and in 1914, there was some talk about the new Brisbane City Hall being built on this site here. This is where the old Dara House used to be. Bishop Dewey eventually knocked it down. So in 1914 they were talking about it. Should we build the new Brisbane City Hall here in Fortitude Valley? I don't think anyone was terribly keen on the idea, and it was still in 1914 that they decided to build it where it currently is, on Albert Street. So this site here remained unused, and it wasn't long afterwards that the Catholic Church started talking about building the Holy Name Cathedral here. Obviously you can see some of which was built. Just down there, behind this swirly curly thing here, the entrance down there to Cathedral Place, there were huge stairs there, and you can walk up there on to the high ground, up to the top there. And I remember doing so years ago, back in the 80s. Dara, the old house, could have been the site of Brisbane City Hall, and could have been the site of the largest Catholic cathedral in the Southern Hemisphere, and now it's apartments. It was in the early 1890s that 9 children were drowned while swimming in Breakfast Creek near the confluence of the Brisbane River. Their deaths initiated plans to build a proper, safe swimming pool here in the valley. And those plans were realised in 1896 with the opening of the Baru Dabin Baths. Later on in 1925, newer baths were built just next door to the old ones, and those newer ones are the Valley Swimming Pool, 1925. I'm on Anderson Street. The old museum is just behind me over there. But if you walk down this way, come down to here to Diggle's Close, and at the end of the close is incredibly an old army base. Now who would have thought that? An army base here in the valley. These old buildings were originally over at Boundary Street, and they were known as the Water Street Drill Hall. They housed infantry units of the Queensland Volunteer Force. This is the orderly room, and this dates from 1885. Across the way is the large drill hall itself, that's 1884, and next to it is the cottage, also 1884. They were moved here to this site, just off Anderson Street, in 1925.
During World War II, many men went to the Water Street depot with their call-up papers, where they were processed for active service.
I'm on Warner Street. Now this bit is a little bit tricky because I can't quite get close enough to the building I want to talk about it. It's in the distance, it's that one just there. That's the old Walton's building. It was originally the Overall building. That was a Fortitude Valley company that was very successful in its day. It was a department store. In 1907, and built 2 floors. The top 3 floors were added in 1927. What was good about them was that they had store frontage on Wickham Street and Brunswick Street. In 1956, the building and the company was purchased by Walton Sears, and then that closed in 1987. After that, it became a Venture Store, and that closed in 1994, and I believe it's still abandoned even today.
In 1935, there were petitions to the government for money to improve Brunswick Street Railway Station. All were rejected, including a name change from Brunswick Street Station to Fortitude Valley Station. The name was eventually changed 73 years later to Fortitude Valley Station.
The Valley Police Station, that opened in 1936. On that site there used to be a lockup, and that dated back to 1855. The Waterloo Hotel, this opened in 1937, but there was an earlier hotel on this site. It was built in 1880 and it was a wooden hotel. It was known as Mrs. Wheeler's Hotel. She was the proprietor. Soon after, it was rebuilt in brick, and now we have this current one, which is in the functionalist Art Deco style. It says out the front of the Waterloo, though, that it's the original Valley pub. I wonder why they say that, because, I mean, the Royal George predates it by about 30 years.
In 1940, the Story Bridge opened. It was originally going to be called the Jubilee Bridge after King George V, but he died before the bridge was completed, hence no Jubilee. It was named in honour of John Douglas Story, a civil servant who agitated for the bridge to be built. Its design was heavily influenced by the Jacques Cartier Bridge in Montreal, Canada. The road over the Story Bridge is known as the Bradfield Highway. The name of the road over the Sydney Harbour Bridge is also called the Bradfield Highway. At the southern end of Story Bridge, a toll booth was built.
In its day, it earned £24,748, which was below the £30,000 level which they thought the toll booths would bring in. This shortfall was blamed on petrol rationing, and it was World War II, so that's understandable. Unfortunately, the money that the toll booth made doesn't seem to have been able to pay the interest bill on the bridge. The reason why I've come up this road here is because right here in front of me, this is a very unusual igloo kind of building. What is it now? Sam Kitchen and Catering. The consensus, I believe, about this building is that it was built by the Americans during World War II. It is in that traditional war igloo shape. I don't really know what else it could be. I mean, you don't get Eskimos this far south. And coming up to the intersection of Wickham Street and East Street, and you'll find the remains of a couple of World War II bomb shelters. This, of course, is just the central supports and the roof. Back during World War II, it was one big concrete brick box. So I'd be now inside of it. And there's another one just over there as well. Handy place now to park your motorbike. In 1947, the toll booths were removed, but they don't actually disappear from history. The old toll booth still exists. It was moved out to 436 Old Cleveland Road at Cooperoo, and today is Tackle Warehouse.
For Fortitude Valley, there was bad news on the horizon as regional shopping centres began to be opened. The first one was at Chermside in 1957. Toombul Shopping Centre followed in 1967, Indooroopilly in 1970, Garden City in 1971, and Brookside Shopping Centre also in 1971. The appearance of these suburban shopping centres heralded the decline of Fortitude Valley as a popular shopping destination. In 1969, the Brisbane tram network was shut down. For decades, customers had relied on the trams to get them to the valley to do their shopping. By the late 1970s, major retailers and manufacturers either closed down or moved out of the area. Where once you had smartly dressed shoppers and stores proudly displaying their wares, now you had illegal gambling, crooked cops, prostitution, and drugs.
I'm next door to 4ZZZ, and next to it is Sterling House. This place here, see that Sterling House? Fairly unremarkable building, but I guess it must have been important in its day because it's got a very nice foundation stone thing happening here. And I don't know why I found this funny, but it says this stone was well and truly laid on the 10th of March 1952 by the hand of Duncan Mackay, Esquire, Director, etc., etc. This stone was well and truly laid. Was there some controversy about who laid it? Normally they would just say this stone was laid by and then give the name of the person who did the laying. This stone was well and truly laid. On St Paul's Terrace, the building behind me is quite the Fortitude Valley landmark. That's the 4ZZZ radio. Back in the early 1970s though, this was the home of the Communist Party. They had the first floor. On the 19th of April 1972, someone attempted to blow it up. They delivered 16 sticks of gelignite here. The bomb went off. The first floor lifted up. It didn't collapse. Thankfully, no one was injured or killed. Later that night, gunshots were fired into a Maoist bookshop on Elizabeth Street in the city. Police eventually identified the culprit. It was one Gary Mangan, and he was the leader of the Fascist Party. He was charged with the bombing, but the following year in 1973, he was acquitted. 4ZZZ moved in here in 1992. But 1973 saw a second bombing, and the site of that is not too far from here. I'm now on the corner of St Paul's Terrace and Amelia Street, and this rather nondescript building in front of me, that one just there, on the top floor back in 1973, that was the site of the Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub. On the 8th of March 1973, that nightclub was firebombed with a loss of 15 lives. Just outside the main door of the building, they've got a little plaque down here. Not very big, it's easy to miss it, and it just gives the general information about when the attack happened. It was at 2:10 a.m, but around the circumference of this little plaque, it lists all the names of those 15 people who lost their lives on that night.
There were rumours that the nightclub was being used as a place for the trafficking of heroin. 2 barrels of fuel were tipped over in the downstairs foyer and ignited, with the smoke and fumes quickly moving upstairs, followed by the fire. Staff and patrons panicked and tried to flee. However, there was only one fire escape. In all, 15 people died, mainly from smoke inhalation. These are not the only deaths as a result of this attack. 2 people were arrested and sentenced to prison for the crime: John Andrew Stewart and James Richard Finch. Straight afterwards, all further investigations into the attack were stopped, and many suspected that other people had been involved. Both men protested their innocence. There was one person who did know the identities of the others involved, and that was Barbara McCulkin. Her husband was Billy, and they had 2 daughters, Leanne and Vicky. John, Billy, and another man, Vincent O'Dempsey, would sometimes have meetings at Billy and Barbara's house and plan their crimes. And she overheard them talking. After the attack, Barbara was ready to talk and identify those who actually committed the crime. Vincent O'Dempsey and Gary Dubois, fearing they would be named and implicated in the nightclub attack, paid a visit to Barbara. It was on this night that her two daughters were nearby at a birthday party. Daughter Leanne went home first, and then a while later, Vicky followed. Neither of the children, or Barbara, were ever seen again. Billy McCulkin knew that Vincent O'Dempsey was primarily responsible for his wife and daughter's disappearance.
Discover the seedy underbelly of Brisbane on the Moonlight State Fortitude Valley Crime Tour. Visit historic crime scenes including illegal casinos, strip clubs and brothels, and the site of the notorious Whiskey A Go-Go firebombing. Join me, Jack Sim, and my team of guides to discover Brisbane's criminal history. Book a public or private tour at crimetoursaustralia.com.au.
The 1970s and into the early 1980s were perhaps the worst time in the Valley's history, as shops and businesses closed, police corruption, drug dealing and organised crime, and pretty much any vice you could imagine took their place. It became so bad that people just started to avoid the Valley altogether because of its reputation. We see the emergence of gay culture here in the Valley with their own unique identity. Those dreadful times of the 70s are long gone. But the gay culture here has not only survived, but it's definitely thrived. That's the Beat nightclub across the road. It's actually today known as the Beat Mega Club. It opened in 1983 and is probably the most famous gay nightclub in Brisbane. The building was constructed in 1924, and in the 1950s it was the Queensland branch of the Meat and Allied Industries Federation. The things you learn doing these videos. Homosexuality. That was a noise. Homosexuality was decriminalised in Queensland only in 1991. By comparison, it was decriminalised in England in 1967. The Valley Chinatown Mall was opened by Brisbane Lord Mayor Sally Ann Atkinson in 1987. The two stone lions that you see out the front, there's one there and another one here, they are here to guard the mall from evil spirits entering. Are we cool? I can go in? Alright. Maybe I'll go around the other way. In 1991 saw the opening of the Brunswick Street Mall. I'm standing across the road from 7-Eleven Ann Street. Today it's the Crowbar, but back in 1992 it was a venue called the Zoo. It was a place for live music, started by two young women who used money from the New Enterprise Initiative Scheme. That was a scheme to give unemployed people money to start their own businesses. They certainly made a success out of it. It was a real icon and landmark in the Valley. Unfortunately, no more. Well, I'm sure the folks at Crowbar do an awesome job. I'm here at the intersection of Wandoo Street and Ann Street, and just across the road there you can see that old building. Doesn't look too good. I was always intrigued by it, so I made a point of researching it. It's known as the Cusack Building and was built in 1883. It is unique. It's one of the last survivors, and maybe the last survivor, of a type of architecture here in the Valley where you had retail on the ground floor and accommodation on the top floor. Now the ground floor is still being used. There's some sort of, mirror gallery, and so yeah, the building is still being used. It used to be surrounded by verandas. It was beautiful back in the day. I can only find this one photo of it, and you can see up there, you can see the doors and that's where you would have walked out onto the verandas. As to the future of this building, is it going to be pulled down? Is it going to be renovated? Nobody knows. As I finish up part 2 of this history of Fortitude Valley, what I've realised is that the people of the valley, they had to do things themselves. Those who arrived on the ship, the Fortitude, were stuck out in the middle of nowhere. They took the decision to move down near the creek, just off what is today Wickham Street, start a new life and make a future for themselves. And then later on it was companies like TC Burney and McWhirters that made the valley a shopping destination, made it very successful. And then you had the really hard times through the 70s and into the 80s, when it was the community that had to look after itself and try and get through that time. Fortitude Valley is a story of the people here working together and making a success of the place. They made it work. And that is a theme that keeps cropping up again and again throughout its history. Alright, thanks very much for watching the documentary. Fascinating story, and I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you liked it, please consider hitting that like and the subscribe button. I'll see you again in the next video.